I used to think of myself as pretty average. I wasn't the loudest kid in the room, and I definitely wasn't the type to get into drama. Most people knew me as the quiet one who always had her head buried in homework, the one who tried to do everything right because making mistakes terrified me. School was sort of my safe zone. I wasn't popular, I wasn't invisible, just tucked somewhere in between. And honestly, that was enough for me. What made it even easier to stay focused was my English teacher. From the start, I admired her. She had this sharp way of speaking that made you want to sit up straighter and actually listen. She praised hard work, she pushed us to open our minds, and sometimes it felt like she noticed me more than anyone else. For a kid like me, who didn't feel special anywhere else, her approval meant everything. I held on to her words like they were proof I wasn't just another forgettable face in the classroom. I trusted her completely. To me, she wasn't just a teacher. She was someone I thought understood me, someone who wanted me to succeed. I wanted to make her proud more than anyone. Maybe that sounds silly, but when you're 16 and craving validation, a teacher's belief in you can feel like the world. But that's the thing about trust. It's fragile. One crack and everything shatters. And that moment came sooner than I ever expected. The same woman I admired, the same teacher I once saw as a role model, turned around and did something that cut deeper than any insult from a classmate ever could. She looked me straight in the eyes and told the world I was a liar. When I first stepped into her class, I felt like I'd landed somewhere different, somewhere important. She wasn't like the other teachers who stuck to the textbook and droned on until the bell rang. She had this way of pulling us into her world, making literature feel alive, like the words on the page weren't just assignments but pieces of life itself. It was intoxicating, especially for someone like me who had always found comfort in books. She noticed my eagerness right away. I can still remember the first time she singled me out. I'd written an essay that I thought was nothing special, just me pouring my thoughts onto paper. But she read it aloud to the class, paused afterward, and said, "This is what thoughtful writing looks like." My face burned with embarrassment, but inside I glowed. No one had ever made me feel like my words mattered until then. From that day forward, I held her opinion higher than anyone's. When she praised me, I floated through the hallways like nothing could bring me down. When she criticized me, I stayed up nights rewriting and reworking until I felt worthy again. She became this anchor in my life, someone I felt guided by, almost like a second mother. At times, I found myself thinking of things I wanted to tell her. Good news, funny discoveries, even disappointments, just to hear what she'd say. Of course, the rest of the class noticed. They teased me about being her favorite or called me teacher's pet. Sometimes they'd roll their eyes when she asked me to share my thoughts. And maybe it did look that way, but I didn't care. If being close to her meant being mocked a little, then fine. At least someone believed in me. That bond, that connection, felt untouchable. But what I couldn't see then was how fragile it all really was. What looked like favoritism would later twist into something ugly, and the trust I thought was unshakable would collapse, revealing just how dangerous it is to put your whole heart into someone who can turn on you without warning. It started so gradually that I barely noticed at first. One day in class, after I excitedly shared something I'd read outside of school, she raised her eyebrows, rose and said, "Are you sure that's accurate? It sounds like you might be exaggerating." She smiled when she said it, but there was this edge to her tone that made my stomach tighten. I laughed it off, assuring her it was true, but when a couple of kids snickered behind me, I felt the heat crawl up my neck. I tried to convince myself she didn't mean anything by it, that maybe she was just teasing. Still, it stung. A week later, it happened again. I'd answered one of her questions in detail, trying to dive deeper because I loved her class, and she interrupted before I even finished. "Okay, let's not overcomplicate things," she said, waving her hand dismissively. The whole room laughed, and I shrank back into my seat. I wanted to disappear. For the first time, I started to feel like maybe my eagerness, the very thing she once praised, was now something to mock. I clung to the memory of when she used to encourage me. I told myself maybe she was just having bad days, or maybe I was too sensitive. But the moments kept piling up. A comment here, a smirk there, each eroding the foundation of trust I'd built so carefully. During a group project, when I suggested an idea I'd stayed up thinking about, she responded flatly, "That seems unlikely. Let's stick to what's realistic." My group members looked at me with pity, like her rejection confirmed that I was just reaching too far. That night, I cried while rewriting my notes, asking myself if I really did talk too much, dream too big, if maybe she was just trying to bring me back to earth. The worst part was how public it all became. Every time she dismissed me, the class noticed, and some started imitating her tone behind my back. What once felt like admiration from my peers now blurred into ridicule, and I couldn't even tell where the shift had started. I wanted to confront her, but how do you accuse someone you admire, someone who's supposed to guide you, of hurting you in ways that are so subtle they almost sound imaginary when you say them out loud? So instead, I swallowed it down. I told myself I was as overreacting, that if I just worked harder, she'd see me the way she used to. But deep down, the first cracks in our bond had already formed, and I was too afraid to admit that maybe she wasn't who I thought she was. The big moment came when I finally had something worth sharing, something that should have been a celebration. I had entered an essay competition on a whim, just one of those late-night, let's see what happens things, and I actually won. Not just won, but placed first out of hundreds of other students across the district. They were even going to publish my essay online and send me a small scholarship prize. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere beyond just four walls of a classroom. I walked into school the next day with my heart pounding, rehearsing how to tell everyone. When class started, I raised my hand and, in the middle of a discussion, blurted it out. "I have some exciting news," I said, my voice shaking with equal parts nerves and joy. I won the district essay contest. A couple of kids turned toward me, curious, and I saw their eyebrows lift in surprise. For once, I thought maybe they'd look at me differently, maybe even respect me. But then came the moment that shattered me. Instead of smiling or congratulating me, my teacher tilted her head with that sharp, skeptical look I had grown to dread. "Really?" she said slowly, drawing the word out until it felt heavy with sarcasm. The class chuckled softly, thinking maybe it was a joke. I swallowed, forcing myself to nod. "Yes, really. They're publishing my essay." She crossed her arms. "And where is this proof? Funny how no one else has heard about it. Are you sure you're not exaggerating again?" The laughter in the room grew louder. My stomach dropped like I'd been punched. "I'm not exaggerating," I whispered, but my voice shook so much it barely sounded convincing. She looked around the room, then back at me, and her words sliced through whatever pride I had left. "You see, class, this is why we have to be careful about honesty. Some people like to embellish their achievements to get attention." The room erupted into giggles, and everything blurred. I could see faces turning to look at me, smirks spreading, whispers starting to form. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. I tried to protest, but all that came out was this broken sound caught between anger and tears. She had called me a liar, in front of everyone, and no one doubted her, not even for a second. That betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. This was the woman I admired, the one whose validation had once fueled me, and now she was dismantling me in public, stripping away every shred of credibility I had. Suddenly, my reputation wasn't bright anymore. It was poisoned. The teacher calling me a liar wasn't just an insult. It was a verdict. For the rest of that period, I sat frozen, staring down at my desk, blinking back tears that blurred the ink on my notes. Every laugh from across the room felt like a stone being hurled at me. When the bell finally rang, I bolted out before anyone could corner me, but their whispers followed me down the hallway, sticky as tar. That was the exact moment where everything shifted. I wasn't the hardworking, quiet student anymore. From then on, I was the liar, and no matter how hard I screamed the truth in my own head, I couldn't drown out her voice, echoing over and over. Some people like to embellish their achievements. It didn't just sting, it redefined me in their eyes. And in the cruelest twist, it came from the person whose approval I had once believed mattered more than anyone else's. The days after that class felt like living inside a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Everywhere I went, whispers seemed to follow me. In the cafeteria, kids leaned across tables, smirking as they said things just loud enough for me to hear. "Careful, she makes things up," or "Wonder what story she's telling today." The cruelest part wasn't the strangers. It was the people I had once considered friends. They stopped inviting me to sit with them, avoided eye contact in the halls, and when I asked why, they'd give me vague answers, as if my supposed dishonesty was contagious and they didn't want to catch it. What hurt the most was how quickly the label stuck. I'd worked for years to be the quiet, dependable student, the one teachers could rely on. But one accusation from her undid it all in minutes. Suddenly, if I answered too confidently in class, someone would mutter, "Here we go again." If I mentioned anything remotely good in my life, eyes rolled. Even my silence was mocked, like I was plotting my next lie. Their laughter cut me down until I barely recognized the girl staring back at me in the mirror every morning. At home, I thought I'd find some comfort. But instead, my parents gave me wary looks that broke me more than all the bullying combined. I had told them about the essay contest, shown them the email, but when the rumors reached them, doubt stirred. My dad asked quietly if I might have misunderstood the competition results. My mom pressed her lips together tight and said, "You know, lying has real consequences." Hearing those words from her made me crumble. If my own parents thought I might be lying, what chance did I have of convincing anyone else? I spiraled between rage and despair. Some nights I would storm around my room, punching pillows, screaming into them, imagining myself shouting my innocence into every face that taunted me. Other nights, I'd go completely numb, curled on the floor with tears running silently down my cheeks, wondering if fighting even mattered anymore. Because that was the terrifying thought gnawing at me. In a world where one person in power can define the truth, did the actual truth even matter? What was the point of being honest if no one would believe me? It's a crushing thing to watch your integrity crumble because of someone else's voice. Even though I knew deep down I hadn't lied, I began to carry myself like I had. Shoulders hunched, eyes low, afraid that anything I said would be twisted and mocked. And in that silence, the teacher's voice wasn't just an echo, it was the only narrative that seemed to matter. The weeks that followed were some of the loneliest of my life. life. It wasn't just the whispers anymore. It was the way people looked at me, with something in their eyes that was part amusement, part disdain. If I walked into a group conversation, it would suddenly fall silent and then burst into laughter the moment I walked away. They made inside jokes about fairy tales and fantasies, pretending to ask me to tell them a story, then snickering when I kept my head down. I tried to ignore it, but it's hard to ignore when the floor itself feels like it's vibrating with humiliation. Even my schoolwork, the one place I thought I could still prove myself, became another tool for their cruelty. I'd hand in assignments I'd poured myself into, assignments I knew were good, but when the results came back with high marks, the reaction was predictable. She must have copied. Bet she begged for those points. Sometimes kids whispered it, but other times they said it out loud, loud enough to sting. I'd glance at my teacher, hoping she'd shut them down, but she never did. Instead, she'd tighten her lips or shrug like she couldn't control what they thought. But the way she stared at me when the room laughed, it always felt like she agreed with them. It spread into every corner of my life. No one wanted me in their group projects. If teachers assigned me somewhere, my teammates would groan, telling each other they didn't want to deal with lies. When partners were optional, I'd be left standing alone, clutching my books like some pathetic reminder that I didn't belong. Sometimes I convinced myself it didn't matter, but the loneliness was suffocating. I'd press my nails into my palms under my desk just to focus on something other than the laughter ringing in my ears. At night, the weight of it all crushed me even harder. I lay awake for hours, replaying the humiliations like a broken movie reel. My chest would tighten until it felt like something was sitting on top of me, and I'd have to curl into a ball just to calm down. On worse nights, I'd cry so hard into my pillow that my face was puffy the next morning. I tried to hide it with makeup, but keeping up that mask while fighting through each day made me exhausted in a way that no one around me noticed or cared to. I started having panic attacks right in the school bathrooms, knees tucked to my chest, trying to quiet the sobs so people wouldn't hear. My hands would tremble so violently I couldn't even grip my pen in class afterward. There were moments I thought about giving up completely, dropping out, disappearing. The world felt like it had turned against me for a crime I didn't commit, and the punishment was endless. What hurt the worst wasn't even the classmates. It was her. The teacher I had trusted most, the one adult I thought would always see me, continued letting it happen. Sometimes she'd make little comments, sliding them into her lectures. Honesty matters most because lying will eventually catch up with you. Her eyes flicking toward me before swiveling back to the board. Everyone would glance in my direction, snickers buried behind coughs. Those moments cut the deepest. When your peers break you, it's painful. But when the person guiding the class silently agrees with them, it leaves you feeling truly alone. By then, I wasn't just isolated. I was a ghost, haunting the hallways, drifting silently through a world where my every word, my every truth, had been poisoned by one accusation I couldn't escape. It was during one of those days when everything felt unbearable that someone finally noticed. I'd just come out of the bathroom, eyes red from trying and failing to stop another round of tears. Bliss I felt. How even at home, I wasn't sure anyone believed me. Part of me expected him to laugh or look at me with the same doubt everyone else did, but he didn't. He leaned forward, his brow furrowed, and said, "I believe you." Those 3 words nearly undid me. I hadn't realized how desperate I was to hear them until that moment. He didn't just believe me, he gave me direction. If you know you're telling the truth, don't stay silent. Gather your proof. Keep your emails, your certificates, any evidence you have. Don't let someone rewrite your story. His voice was firm but kind, and for the first time in months, I felt a tiny ember of hope spark inside me. Walking home that day, his words echoed in my head. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't powerless after all. The very next day, I started digging. It felt strange at first, like I was building a case in court instead of just proving a simple truth. But Mr. Daniel's words kept replaying in my mind. Don't let someone rewrite your story. If she wanted to tear me down, I would give myself armor strong enough to stand again. Step 1 was my inbox. I scrolled back through weeks of emails until I found it. The official congratulations message from the district, with the certificate attached as a PDF. For all the paranoia she had planted in me, seeing that clean digital proof made my heart jolt. I printed a copy at the library and slipped it carefully into a folder as if it were solid gold. But I didn't stop there. I emailed the contest director directly, asking for confirmation of my win. Within an hour, I had a polite reply. "Yes, congratulations again. We're looking forward to publishing your essay." That message too got printed and tucked into my growing stack of papers. One piece of evidence wasn't enough for me anymore. I wanted an avalanche. I went further back into my files, saving drafts of the essay, screenshots with the submission date, even the receipt from the entry form. I wanted every breadcrumb that showed I hadn't made this up. The more I gathered, the stronger I felt. But still, every time I sat in class and heard the snickers around me, my confidence wavered. No matter how much proof I collected, their laughter reminded me that words have power, and hers had poisoned me deeply. I pushed through it by reminding myself that soon, I wouldn't just be insisting I was telling the truth, I'd be proving it. I started confiding in the few people I thought might still have a shred of neutrality. Hannah, a quiet girl who never joined the bullying, told me she'd heard me mention the contest weeks before before the accusation. She even remembered me showing her the email that day. "I can tell them if you need me to," she said shyly. I nearly hugged her, the relief overwhelming me. Piece by piece, I built my case like a fortress. Proof, witnesses, written records, it all went into that folder that never left my backpack. But even as it grew, Avier with evidence, the jokes didn't stop. My classmates sneered, still clinging to that fake story, when they saw me writing in my notebook. The teacher herself, during one lecture, glanced at me and said, "Some lies get bigger the longer you hold them." The class laughed, but this time, something inside me was different. Their words stung, yes, but now I had steel in my hands and I was just waiting for the right moment to swing it. Every time I zipped up that folder, I whispered to myself, "One day this will end, and when it does, she won't be able to bury me anymore." The moment came faster than I expected. It was during parent-teacher conference night when the hallways were buzzing with nervous students and their families shuffling from one classroom to another. My parents had insisted we attend, and part of me dreaded walking into her classroom again. Still, there was another part of me, the part that had been carefully building my folder of proof, that told me this was it. This was the night I would finally take back my name. We sat across from her polished desk. My mom perched stiffly on one side while my dad glanced down at the notes he had scribbled beforehand. She greeted them with her usual sharp smile, the kind that always seemed more like a smirk than anything genuine. Then she launched right in. "Your daughter has potential, but I'm concerned about her honesty. There have been incidents. That word burned in my ears like acid. My parents shifted uncomfortably, and I knew hesitation when I saw it. They weren't sure whether to believe me or her. That was when my heart stopped shaking, and my hands went into my backpack. I pulled out the thick folder, dropped it on the desk with a deliberate thud, and for once, I didn't let fear choke my voice. "With all due respect," I said, my eyes locked on hers, "I'm not a liar, and I can prove it." Her smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" I opened the folder, sliding the papers across the desk one by one. "This is the office in. I'll email from the district congratulating me on winning the essay contest. This is the confirmation from the director. Here are the drafts of my essay with timestamps, the entry receipt, and the publication announcement. And this," I pulled out the final sheet, my hands steady as stone, "is my name listed on their website as the winner." The room went so quiet, I could hear the air conditioner hum above us. My mom leaned in, scanning every page, her eyes widening. My dad raised his head, looking from the papers to my teacher with a face that said, "Explain this." My teacher's lips twitched. She cleared her throat, fumbling for composure. "Well, perhaps there was some misunderstanding. I didn't mean to accuse her so harshly." "No," I interrupted, my voice breaking but firm. "You didn't just misunderstand. You called me a liar. You humiliated me in front of the entire class. You knew what you were doing." For the first time, I let the raw pain bleed through. "Do you have any idea what it's been like for me since then? Everyone laughs at me. No one believes me. Even my parents didn't believe me. You ruined me. Because you wanted to." The shift in power was instantaneous. My parents, who once looked uncertain, now glared at her with an anger I hadn't seen before. She shrank in her seat, the authority slipping away from her like sand through open fingers. My dad's voice cut through the silence, sharp and cold. "How dare you brand our daughter a liar without evidence? How dare you damage her reputation like this?" I looked around and realized we weren't alone. Other parents and students lingering outside had heard the raised voices and gathered near the doorway. They stood frozen, listening. For once, all the eyes weren't mocking me. They were watching her crumble. She sputtered, I just wanted to encourage accountability." "No," my mom snapped. "You tried to bury her." And in that moment, something inside me shifted for good. The fear that had lived in my chest for months evaporated under the weight of the truth. All of the power she'd once held over me was gone. There I was, standing not as her victim, but as the one who had finally cornered her with nothing but the facts she'd tried so hard to erase. It was the sweetest, rawest justice I could have asked for. News travels fast in high school, faster than wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew what had happened at the conference. Whispers in the hall sounded different now. No one was calling me a liar anymore. Instead, they were muttering about her, about how a teacher could humiliate a student so carelessly. The shift was almost dizzying. The same kids who once sneered at me now couldn't meet my eyes. Some avoided me completely, ducking into classrooms when I walked by. Others wore expressions heavy with guilt, their laughter finally silenced. A few brave ones tried to apologize. Hannah squeezed my shoulder in the hallway, whispering, "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." Another classmate, who used to mock me the loudest, approached hesitantly and said, I shouldn't have laughed. That wasn't fair." Their words didn't undo the damage, but hearing them stumble through guilt gave me a strange sense of power. They had believed the worst of me so easily, and now they were choking on their own shame. My parents, too, finally saw saw the full picture. The look on their faces when they read the emails and saw my name listed among the winners was something I'll never forget. My mom actually teared up, her voice trembling as she admitted, "I should have trusted you. I'm so sorry." My dad wasn't as emotional, but his silence that night spoke volumes. His doubt had cut deep and he knew it. For once, the hesitation in their eyes was replaced with pride, mixed with regret for not standing by me sooner. Being vindicated felt incredible, but it didn't erase the scars, the laughter, the isolation, the countless sleepless nights, I had already carved their mark into me. I walked through those halls with the truth finally on my side, but I was no longer the same girl who had once looked up to her teacher with wide-eyed admiration. I carried the memory of betrayal with me, but alongside it, a quiet strength. Because now, everyone knew what I had known all along. I wasn't the liar. She was. Looking back now, I realized that whole experience reshaped me in ways I never could have imagined. For months, I lived under the weight of a title that wasn't mine. Liar. It clung to me like a shadow, following me into the halls, into my dreams, into my own reflection when I could barely recognize myself anymore. And yet, surviving it taught me more than any classroom lecture ever could about the power of truth and the danger of silence. What hurt the most wasn't just being doubted. It was how quickly people embraced a version of me that didn't exist. How easily they sided with authority even without proof. I learned then that truth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, fragile, and easy to trample if nobody defends it. But I also learned this. No matter how deeply you're buried in lies, if you hold on tight enough, the truth will claw its way back to the surface. And when it does, it's stronger than anything that tried to smother it. I reclaimed myself piece by piece. The girl who used to tremble walking into class found her voice again, shaky at first, then steadier each time. I began raising my hand without flinching, speaking without rehearsing every word in my head. And every time I shared my thoughts, I remembered that day, slamming my folder of evidence onto her desk, proving to myself that I was worthy of being heard. That teacher lost the power she once held over me, but more importantly, I stopped giving anyone else the power to define me. Authority can be intimidating, twisted, even cruel, but it doesn't make it infallible. For the rest of my life, I'll carry that lesson with me. That voices in power can lie, they can manipulate, but my own truth still has weight. And strangely enough, I don't carry bitterness toward her anymore. What she did broke me down, yes, but it also forced me to rebuild. Stronger, sharper, less naive. Without her betrayal, I might never have discovered my resilience. I might never have realized how unshakable my voice could be once I decided it mattered. So no, I didn't just survive being called a liar. I flipped that word on its head and turned it into a reminder of who I refused to become. I walked out of that chapter not as the quiet, obedient student who worshipped her teacher, but as someone who knows her worth, someone who fought for her truth and won. And that is the kind of victory no rumor, no whisper, and no corrupted authority can ever take away.